Greetings everyone. Welcome to Datagaps webinar. I am Puja Gupta, Growth Marketing Manager at Datagaps, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Second, we have included a couple of polls which will reflect in the middle of the session from time to time. And we would request every attendee to share their feedback by answering those poll questions. And last, if you have any queries, please type it in Q&A section and we'll take them all at the end of the session. Today in our session on Trust Every Tableau Dashboard, automating end-to-end BI testing with Datagaps DataOps Suite, we will explore how even small errors in KPIs, filters, and visuals can undermine business trust, and how Datagaps Zero-Code DataOps Suite helps you automate validation, regression testing, performance checks, and security in one streamlined workflow. We will walk away with a practical framework to scale BI testing without slowing the delivery. And for this, on the panel today, we have Mr. Anand Rao, VP of Marketing at Datagaps, and Shubhanshu Dixit, Senior Solution Architect at Datagaps. And with this, I hand this over to Anand and Shubhanshu. Hey Anand, stage is all yours now.
Great. Thank you, Puja. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Great that you found us. And, if you're a repeat webinar viewer, great to have you here again. If you're a first-time viewer, welcome. Thanks for finding our company. Thanks for registering. Thanks for attending. We hope this webinar is super useful to you. We want to keep it jam-packed and serve a variety of audience, both at a business level as well as a technical level. We'll show you how to keep your dashboards accurate and fast using simple, repeatable tests. You'll see what usually breaks, how to catch those problems before users do, and how to plug those tests into your whole release process. We'll keep the language good for both technical users as well as managers, and finish with a short plan on how you can put this to use at your workplace. So let's get started. So here's the agenda. We'll start by setting the context, why business intelligence testing matters, the problems that we are looking to solve, our own approach at Datagaps and our core capabilities, the ROI math in plain numbers, and why adopting a test automation platform like Datagaps is an absolute no-brainer. We'll do a live demo. Shubhanshu here is going to do, a couple of different use cases on regression tests, upgrade tests, measuring key validations, and performance and stress tests. We won't actually do the whole stress test, but, you get a feel for that. And then you'll walk away with an implementation blueprint that you can adopt, and then we'll end with key takeaways and next steps. So please drop your questions in the chat. We'll save space for Q&A in the end. So let's start with why BI testing is important. So here are some statistics that I wanted to throw out here so that you get a feel for the problem and why you need testing. So most companies use more than one BI tool. Tableau, in your case, Power BI, or any other third-party tool. So that variety is useful, but it makes testing harder. When you upgrade a BI tool, migrate to the cloud, or change the data model, small differences can change the numbers on a chart, and you are well aware of this. So moving business intelligence to the cloud helps with the costs and uptime. You have less infrastructure to manage. You get strong SLAs, but the quality still depends on the testing. The most common gap that we see is regression testing, rechecking that nothing broke after the change. Many teams do a quick visual scan, but they don't verify the numbers or the filters in depth. That's how these silent errors slip through. A KPI that looks right but uses the wrong filter, a chart change after an upgrade, a time zone shift moves a date by 1 day. So a test automation suite solves this with 4 simple pillars. Report to database checks. So you compare the numbers on the dashboard to the same number from an approved SQL query. Visual regression, where you have side-by-side screenshots highlighting the layout, the text, or the value drift down to the pixel. Then you have filter and parameter matrices where you can automatically click through several combinations to confirm the results. And then you have performance tests, which help you simulate real users to catch those slow pages before the release. And you tie all this in to a continuous integration, continuous development process, and have as well as collaboration tools, and you get repeatable quality gates, faster releases, and higher trust from business users. So let's talk about what modernization looks like. So modernization often means 3 changes, and they can happen one after the other, or they can happen simultaneously. So you have a new data platform, example, moving from on-premise SQL Server to a cloud platform like Snowflake or Databricks. You have updated ETL or ELT pipelines, and you have refreshed dashboards. So each step can introduce drift. So data types changing, or there are rounding errors, join behavior changes, time zone rules are different, or any kind of default filter settings change. So the safest path is to validate the full chain. So the step 1 would be to compare the source with the target tables, check the counts, the sums for key tables, run sample row level differences. This proves that the move in the data warehouse preserve the data. Then step 2 is the transformation validation. So you recompute the important business rules independent of the ETL platform and compare that to the pipeline's output. So this catches any kind of logic differences caused by your refactoring. And third step would be the dashboard testing. So using the visual differences to spot any kind of layout or text change, run a filter matrix to verify the interactions, finally anchor those numbers with a report to database check so that what people see actually matches the approved SQL that you have. And you run these plans across your dev, test, prod environments during this cutover window. You schedule nightly runs while the migration is active, send results to tickets, chat with screenshots and SQL snippets. So the practical benefit is you have much calmer go lives into production, faster sign off, and confidence to decommission your legacy systems. Because now you have evidence that data moved correctly, the dashboards behave the same, and the performance meets the SLAs. So let's dive in a little more into BI testing. So dashboards fail in small ways that cause big headaches. So example, a field is renamed, so a measure drops to 0. A time zone shift moves dates by 1 day. A BI upgrade changes the default number formats. A data migration changes how a particular function behaves. So totals no longer match what finance provides. So manual testing struggles here because there are too many pages, too many filters, too many roles to cover. And so what you're doing is converting each risk into an automated check. So you're binding the metrics to quote unquote SQL truth. So for the key KPIs, you run the same calculation in the database, compare it to the visual with and without filters. And you run pixel level visual checks. If a title, a legend, or a value moves, you'll see it instantly on a different, on an image that showcases the differences. And you exercise all those filters that you provide in your dashboard, the different parameters, like a real user. So you choose the date range, the product segments, the currencies that you have in the report, and you confirm the outputs. You can also simulate multiple users to check the page load time as well as the interaction time. And you connect all these tests to your pipeline so that they run on every change, not just before a certain deadline. So each result should include evidence, which test failed, the screenshot highlighting the difference, the exact SQL that you used, and links to sample bad rows. So this turns the numbers look off into a quick fixable issue instead of a week-long debate. So let's go over some of the capabilities, what we test, how it runs, how the results flow into your team. We'll keep this hands-on and practical so you can copy some of the patterns for your particular project. So the goal is to have a simple toolkit that you can reuse on any platform. So since some of you are new attendees and I had a quick look at our registration, so I know that. So a quick introduction. At Datagaps, we focus on observing and validating the full data journey from all the way from ingestion to consumption in your analytics platform. So our mission is to empower enterprises with trustworthy data, analytics, and AI. So we deliver this through our DataOps Suite. It's an end-to-end web-based platform that can be licensed both at an individual module level as well as a bundle. And the core product for this use case are the ETL validator, the BI validator, the data quality monitor, and we also have a test data manager which together automate pipeline testing, the report to data reconciliation, continuous data quality monitoring, as well as synthetic data generation. So you can deploy the suite on premises or in your cloud, fully contained behind your firewall. We never see or retain your data. We're built on Apache Spark, the platform that can scale to billions of rows, so you can validate at production volumes without any kind of sampling. And Datagaps is recognized by Gartner, the analyst firm, as a specialist in the data pipeline test automation category. And our credibility in business intelligence testing is proven. 2 of the top 5 Tableau installations rely on Datagaps for their business intelligence testing. So that shows, we have been around a while. We are SOC 2 Type 2 certified. We have been in business for 10 plus years, and we actively serve 75 customers. So that's a little plug. And here are some scenarios our BI testing covers and that match how people use their dashboards. So first, of course, is checking the sources, confirming the right data loads to that scheduled extract are fresh. Then you have functional checks. You enforce the business rules, no duplicates, valid formats, correct keys, required fields are present. Any kind of visual checks where you detect the layout or the text drift between pixel level comparisons. So any cosmetic changes, don't hide those value changes. And then you got report to database checks. You compare what the dashboard shows to an approved SQL query, including when the filters are applied. And then you do performance checks, You simulate the user traffic, measure the load and interaction times to protect the SLAs, and you do also security checks to confirm the right roles can see the right content. So these turn manual reviews into one governed process. The workflow is simple: pick a plan, either upgrade, regression, or performance, point it to your environment, hit run, and review the pass-fail results with screenshots, SQL, links to tickets. Because plans are reusable and parameterized, the same setup works for dev, test, and prod without rewriting the tests, and that reduces your effort and keeps the quality consistent across teams. So the platform is built, as I said, for enterprise level teams and enterprise size data. It connects to common platforms: Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift, BigQuery, Oracle, SQL Server, files in different formats: CSV, Parquet, APIs, and BI tools: Tableau, Power BI. So tests can run where your data lives and scale using Spark or push down SQL. So comparing large tables is fast. And automation, you can run on schedule on every pull request. When something fails, we open or update a ticket with the exact evidence needed to fix it. Security is built in. You deploy behind your firewall, use your identity system, keep data under your control. And to speed adoption, we have some starter templates, the upgrade checks, any kind of filter matrices, performance runs that you can customize and copy across your teams. And the results are easy to share with business users. One report lists what passed, what failed, screenshot of differences, SQL behind key numbers. So that makes any kind of sign off quick and objective and keeps everyone on the same page. So here's a look at the impact. So when teams standardize their testing, 3 wins show up quickly. First, you have faster release cycles. So because the tests are reusable and run at unattended, upgrades and releases move 45 to 55% faster. We have seen this in our customers. You have lower QA costs. Machines handle repetitive checks. So your QA analysts focus on exploring edge cases, improving the user experience. And then there's a higher trust and adoption. So when numbers always match the SQL truth behind them, the pages load within the targeted time, business users stop second guessing their dashboards. And you'll also see fewer support tickets because the filter logic, the performance are verified before going live in production. So one large enterprise reported about a 25% drop in the total cost of ownership. And this was because of less rework, fewer incidents, faster approvals. So most importantly, leaders will get the reliable answers when they need them, which is the whole point of business intelligence. So, you probably are leading a team. You are looking to make some kind of purchase decision. So let's use some simple math. Okay, these numbers, once you request a demo and you have the QR code there, we can customize these numbers for your scenario. So say you have 50 reports. Each report has 5 pages. There are 3 tests per page. So roughly around 750 tests. So building each test would probably take you an hour. Running them manually would probably take you half an hour per test. Automated runs will cut that down tremendously to around 6 minutes. So if you test monthly, that's 12 runs per year. So based on these calculations, the manual effort is around 5,250 hours. The automated effort will bring that down to 1,650 hours. So suppose your labor cost is around $50 an hour. The cost of that immediately comes down from 262,000 to 83,000. Of course, nothing comes for free. You add around 44,000 for the licenses, the setup, your compute infrastructure, and the automated total is around 127,000. So the net effect is that you have greater than 50% lower cost, 52% to be precise. You have almost a 70% less time to test, and that results in a 3x ROI. So besides those hard numbers, your soft wins matter too. So you have fewer late night fixes, faster approvals because the evidence is clear, fewer support tickets because filter issues and slow pages are now caught early. So use this model to start a pilot. Pick one domain, automate the top KPIs and pages, plug those tests into your CI/CD process, measure the time saved, defects prevented, and if the pilot pays for itself, and it usually does, so clone that approach across your teams. So if you want to learn more, again, as I said, scan that QR code and request a demo, and we'll go over those ROI numbers. So here's a case study that we have. It's a big Tableau installation. On this webinar, we decided to focus on Tableau. So a global pharma company with 11,000 plus users, Tableau users, and 6 production environments needed to upgrade frequently without breaking the reports. So manual testing by the business users took too long and they missed some of the issues. So they adopted automated plans. So the upgrade plan involved comparing the old versus new dashboards with pixel level differences and any kind of checks on the text. There was a performance plan with measured the load times and flagged those slow reports and pages. There was a functional plan where the automation clicked through filters and parameters to confirm the logic. There was a data compare plan that matched the dashboard numbers to the SQL truth behind it. And the results was the upgrade window shrank by 45 to 50%. The QA effort dropped 20 to 30%. And the whole total cost of ownership fell by 20 to 25%. So most importantly, the confidence rose. Teams promoted changes with clear evidence, fewer late surprises. And this is the same pattern any team can practice on their project. You define the truth, compare it to the visual, and lock in the performance. So, we back up whatever we say with a demo, and we'll show you the exact checks that you can replicate. And so I'll hand this over to Shubhanshu, our solution architect, who will show you a demo. So Shubhanshu, over to you.
So thanks a lot for this. You guys can hear me and see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So let's take where we have left off. So thank you for this. So thank you guys. So welcome to the demo section of this particular setup. What we're going to cover today are a few types of test cases. Now, since you guys are aware about Tableau in a good amount of detail, you're aware that there are multiple dimensions where problems could arise within your reports. And we're going to tackle a few of them today. The first one is going to be along the lines of data, basically making sure your charts and KPIs have the correct numbers associated with them. That's going to be our first use case. Then we're going to discuss upgrade and regression. After that, we'll take a look at catalog, which is going to work with standardization and everything that's non-visual and data-centric to your reports. Because your reports are not just your visual and the numbers, there's a lot of meta-report information present that has to be validated as well. So that is what measure definition is going to be an example of. And finally, performance. We can't really leave that aside. And so let's get started. Now, before I jump into the actual showcase, I do want to accompany that with some kind of information on what we're trying to do. So what you have on your screen is a typical pipeline. And here we are illustrating what exactly we're trying to validate. Now, the assumption here is, all right, my data pipeline has run properly until the golden layer. And again, these numbers are what are being used within my Tableau reports, maybe for an executive summary, maybe the C-suite wants to see the financial reports. And if it's a C-suite or specifically, they want to make sure that the numbers received in their charts are correct. So that's our first use case. We want to make sure that the numbers that we see within the reports are valid. Now, in this example, we're going to run a comparison against the data set within the golden records itself. Now, again, that's one way of validation. There's another way of validation which could look at, say, anomaly detection, looking at the numbers previously and then seeing if the patterns matches. But of course, as you might be aware, this is the golden standard, unintended there, with regards to how we want to validate our reports, because the numbers in the reports should match the numbers in our golden records. With that, let's get started and let me showcase this example live. Of course, before I jump into that example, I just want to give a quick shout out. The application has a ton of connectivity inherent to the product, as you can see within the screen. And critically, for the application, all of these tools are treated in an agnostic manner. Meaning that in my examples, if you see me use an Excel file or a SQL Server table, the process is completely identical for Databricks tables, Salesforce objects, Avro files, and everything in between. Now, let's take a look at our sample test case. This test case, which is already generated, can be created using, say, wizards that the application provides, as well as a good amount of AI assistance. Now, let's take a look at the actual use case itself. We have our Tableau report, which is already loaded in. And as you can see, the critical part here is that we connect directly to the BI server. This helps us in two places. Firstly, it helps us in automatic generation of test cases, as I'll illustrate in the demonstration. And second, it helps us validate the reports from their latest refresh version as well. We don't want end users to upload reports repeatedly or have a cycle of that front. When an end user defines a template, like the ones you're seeing on your screen right now, they should be done. As Anand has put forward previously, once you define a test case, it can be reused across environments, and it can also be reused for different filter combinations. More on that later. Of course, let's assume without filters, we want to make sure that the numbers we see within our reports are correct. The first aspect is fetching this information, and it's as simple as clicking on worksheets and you're good to go. As an end user, I can select multiple data sets, all the KPIs and every other aspect inherently. And as execution results is going to say, we are indeed connecting to the BI server itself, fetching these reports live. And in case there are filters and parameters to apply, we're applying them. And in this example, we're converting that data that we receive from the BI server into datasets. In other examples, you'll see us convert them into visual elements like PDFs. But critically, what we have from our first step, which is as simple as dragging and dropping a couple of nodes, is the data set that we would like to validate. Now comes the question, well, what is your golden record? Now here I've gone ahead with an Excel file for a very simple example to illustrate that it can be anything. Once again, the application is completely agnostic. And while Excel is very powerful for a lot of other use cases, you can connect to your golden layer specifically. And now one critical point. This raw data that we are working with is not in aggregated form. In fact, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have direct apples to apples comparison between your golden layer tables and your Tableau report. In fact, your Tableau report could be an amalgamation of multiple tables as well. So how do we tackle that? To help the end user work with this, we basically have copilots. So here we can just ask the system to create an aggregation for me. And again, by the way, this is completely optional, but it's very powerful because we generate a RAG along with the AI agent to create more accurate queries. You can think of RAG as basically an additional textbook you can provide to GPT-like systems. And because you ask them a question and you even provided a textbook like reference material on that, they are much more better at creating the queries as required. So that's what our secret there is, which is just a contextual model. And what this helps us now is create an aggregation. Now, again, this could be from a singular table. This could be from a combination of tables. This could be from a combination of tables, files, APIs, and a lot more. But critically, what you have at the end is an aggregation generated from your golden records. Now, the only thing left to do after that is a comparison. That is where data compare comes into play. This is a very powerful node. It can scale up to billions of records. It can scale up to 1,000 column wide tables as well. But critically for this particular use case, it helps with automatic data type conversion, column name conversion. It helps you with customizing a lot of the aspects with a zero code setup. So again, there's no technical requirement within the application as such. And its end result is that the application is going to call out mismatches within the system. Now, of course, this is a cherry-picked example where I've created a minute difference to illustrate that the application can capture this. However, if I want to change this, there are thresholding options as well as rounding up options to make sure that I'm only calling out issues or alerts when there is a legitimate issue or mismatch between my Tableau report numbers and my golden record numbers. Of course, you could have other types of problems as well. That is why we have only in A, only in B, and other systems to signify that there are records which are present only within your golden data set, and of course records which are present only within your Tableau report. But as we all might be aware, just finding out issues is not the end of the story, sadly. We have a good amount of post-validation process that we have to do. And that's what you see after report to data comparison. Now here I've gone ahead with an example where I want to make sure that the numbers that I see, if they don't match with the corresponding records, I want to archive them as part of my post-validation process. And that could be one step. You could have a lot more other steps as well. Hence the processor nodes being abundant in SQL, Python, Scala, and a bunch of other nodes as well. And of course, if I want to just save them, I can save them as files, datasets, and a lot more. Critically, what I can also do in parallel is raise tickets. I can raise Jira tickets, I can raise ServiceNow incidents, I can raise Azure test plans, basically tickets from that perspective, and a lot more. There's a ton of integration, and while we see this integration in examples towards the tail end, this entire test case was triggered automatically. You can trigger this using CI/CD pipelines once again. You can make sure that the trigger of this test case is automated. So the moment the reports are upgraded, the regression, and in this case, the report to data compare, gets executed instantly. And of course, as we just to repeat myself, once you define a test case, you're good to go across environments. And of course, anytime you execute a particular test case, there's a run history associated with it. And each time you run this test case, be it for every filter combination or for a different environment, there's a proper report that not only QA personnel, but non-QA personnel can jump into and see exactly the report they're trying to look for, what is the type of validation that has happened, and the subsequent steps. Reporting is something we won't get a lot of time today for, but the critical aspect is this is completely customizable. And most importantly, if you want to see the health of your reports within Tableau, that is a possibility that we work with as well. So that's the first aspect of report to data compare. And what I'm going to use this opportunity for is another tidbit, which is in-depth validation. So in my example, I proceeded with the assumption that, filter application is good, but I want to make sure that everything is fine unfiltered. But that's rarely the case. End users are going to obviously apply specific filters. And we want to make sure that when somebody goes in and applies a filter, that the numbers are still valid after the application of said filters. And of course, this is going to be true for regression and upgrade as well. So if I go ahead and manually apply a filter, that's one way to do it. And again, it's not recommended, but it's definitely possible. The intended method is with, as you can see, parameterization. Now, parameterization opens a big rabbit hole here. Because as end users within this example itself, as you can see, I have about 5 different list of values I can select here, and I have 3 distinct filters. So I'm working with about, say, 5 squared or 5 cube permutation and combinations that I can work with. It could be a bit lesser than that as well. But critically, I don't want an end user going in and selecting these filters one after the other. In fact, even if you define a parameter, we wouldn't want you to, go to the hassle of creating the entire permutation and combination list. So instead of that, what we do from that purview is we create an entire section called BI DevOps. I'll be coming back to this for the later demos as well. And here we create something called as a filter data set. You see, a filter data set is basically the permutation and combination of filters which you deem are worthy for iterative testing. Of course, as you can imagine, if you increase the filters and list of values, this is after all an exponential game. So again, these can get out of hand very quickly. That's why we provide an upper and lower limit here as well as to how many test cases we would like to generate. But critically, the application can pick up the values and then automatically with an upper limit, generate the list of permutation and combination that singular test case is going to run iteratively. Meaning, when I run my report through this particular suite once again, this time it's going to run for Oklahoma, Tables, Furniture, East, and the next is going to switch to storage and so on and so forth. And anytime there's a specific failure, we would understand exactly for which filter these particular test cases are failing. So you know exactly where your problems lie. And while that is one way to define it, another way would be in terms of an end-to-end use case. So now that we move from there, you can see this is an end-to-end use case that we work with. Because what we're trying to illustrate is that at the end of the day, your BI server or your BI reports is the right way to make sure that any particular regressional change, data change, or any particular update within your entire pipeline has no unintended effects. For example, if I change my Salesforce object here, but if I run my validation only till Snowflake, it's only going to give me a partial. And if I was correct here but wrong here, that is still a problem for me. And so the application helps you catch these kind of anomalies within the system itself. Of course, Salesforce and Snowflake are once again standard examples. You can customize this to a great degree. And as we've discussed earlier, any amount of post-validation process can also be handled very easily within the product. And that's our very first example of use cases. Now let's jump back to the slide before I move on to the next one. So before I jump into the next use case, I want to set the stage as to where exactly this is useful. So once again, the key aspect here is whether you're doing an upgrade, whether you're doing a migration, even if it's a database connection update or if it's an environment change, the end result of a BI report is paramount because that is the number that executives and end users and stakeholders are going to read on. So regardless of what you've done in the backend, the numbers or the visuals at the entire report itself should not get altered at any point. So these are 6 examples, and all of these 6 have been used by our clients through multiple stages where the following test of regression and upgrade comes into play. Another reason to have this slide is just to make sure that we are all talking about the same thing, because from our purview, regression and upgrade could mean the same aspect because we're discussing a regressional type change. Critically, we're going to run comparisons between 2 sets of reports, either dev or prod, or as you will see, between the previous version of the report before an upgrade, as well as the next version. So when we do this, what exactly can go wrong? So here I have a simple slideshow on this where we illustrate what can go wrong. And again, visual positioning can be incorrect, the color schemes and any other visual factor can be incorrect, the filters that you're working with themselves could be incorrect, and that's the one that I was discussing earlier. And of course, the numbers, the way the numbers look, alignments, and everything along those fronts could be incorrect as well. And so this is what we're going to see within the product specifically. Now I have a few screenshots before we jump into the product itself, because within the product, what I want to focus on is how easy this is to create. At the end is, if you want to do this for say 50, 60 dashboards, or even say hundreds of dashboards, there should be a streamlined method to catch out these kind of visual differences or any kind of alignment differences, filter differences, performance differences, and more. So with that prelude, let's actually look at a few use cases. So I've opened up an example specifically, which is what we were looking into, and I'll discuss how we have created this. But once again, we're connecting to the report slide. That's the key aspect. You'll see this within execution results that we are indeed opening up the report, authenticating ourselves, applying any filters if there are to apply. And in this example, getting the values as PDF files. So what do we do with them? Well, there are 3 types of checks as we've discussed. The first one is a comparison that you see with the red markers. Anything that textually that is different within the system is highlighted directly. This includes missing values, shift within the position, and other aspects as well. Then, of course, we have visual comparison. Now, in this example, visual comparison is going to be a stop of red because we have a huge amount of changes right there that we are capturing. But no worries, even if you get small changes, this could be very helpful. But critically, what we do is that we add an AI report summary. So even if you have a lot of red drops that you have to work around, the application can automatically provide you a proper summary. And this helps you as an end user to understand exactly what is going wrong between my report. The best part about this is that as end users, you can customize the exact prompt that you're looking for as well. You can give your very own prompt to tell exactly what the report should be looking for. Really helpful, because as an end user, I can just open up this section and see exactly what is going wrong between upgrades, between regression use cases, between any update change or any other use case that we've discussed earlier. Here we have OpenAI, and again, this is purely optional. We have Azure OpenAI and a few other models which are more HIPAA compliant that we support within the product. So everything once again, is within your infrastructure itself, including your own AI system. Of course, that's not the entire thing. We also want to make sure that the filters between our reports are in sync. So that's where we have the filter validation between the list of values themselves as well as definitions. And finally, a soft performance test. We will look at the hard performance test as well, as that's part of our system. But this is basically the time it takes for a report to load in when our singular user, the impersonated user that we are working with, this is the time that user takes to load these reports and apply the filter. So it's very good because after an upgrade, instead of the end user, you as a QA person, you'll be the first one to know if there's a mismatch. Or in this case, there's an issue in terms of, say, the loading times. And to quickly illustrate how fast it is to create this test case, all I have to do is just define what I'm working with. So in this case, I'm working with some regression use cases for my sandbox environment. And this is all that I have to do. I can just drag and drop reports and the application is going to create the test cases for me. And at this point, it is a wizard with next, 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 and so on. So it's as simple as that. And of course, I get to choose all the options. I get to select all the options that we've seen earlier as well. And again, there's a lot more to this that we can discuss in detail in a specific demo. But critically, that's all I have to do to create all of these test cases. My regression suite is ready. And in pipelines, I can decide how I want to run these test cases in dependencies or non-dependencies. But let's make use of our time and let's move on to the other use case as well, which is measure definition validation. Now, this is a bit of a doozy because, again, this is the internal workings of Tableau. And it's not just measure definitions. We get access to font families, we get access to data models, and everything else as well. We are, after all, connecting to the BI server. This is a pretty cool example because be it between versions or be it between entire workbooks, having a consistent measure definition is really important. In this example, I've put a minute change, a very minute change, and very catastrophic in many cases, which is count versus count distinct. Now, if this happens, there's going to be a legitimate difference and problem within your system, and such a problem can be easily missed by plain eye. So what do? Well, we capture it. We capture the difference in a measure definition between versions, and as you can see in this screenshot example, both in terms of regression in the actual value update, as well as in terms of the version change, which version had what particular formula. But what I'll use to showcase this particular within my product is that it's not just different, say, versions. You also want to make sure that the measure definition stays consistent across different workbooks. If you have 50 workbooks and each of them have profit ratio as a measure name, you would like to make sure that all of them mean the same thing, be it sum of profit upon sum of sales or sum of profit upon average of sales. You wouldn't want to see this specifically because now, again, there's a lot of inconsistencies within your system. And within our application, all you have to do is just define the workbooks and the application takes care of these type of validations and a lot more in terms of optimization, in terms of consistency, and a lot more other aspects that we cover within our catalog tests. Now, let's move on to the final use, which is performance, because as you can imagine, this is not something that you want to see within your particular system. You don't want to see the loading times, and if there is something that's taking longer to load, you want to catch that. And the critical aspect of that, what we want to focus in on is stress testing. So again, we'll see the screenshot of this first so that you have this view that you can screenshot yourself, and again, you can always go back to the recording and read. But critically, what we are trying to do here is simulate load on the BI server itself. If you are aware that on Monday morning, there's going to be 300 users trying to access these 20 reports, and you're aware of their specific type of behavior in terms of how long they look at a report, how long this entire activity lasts, you can actually simulate that specific user. In fact, you can simulate that specific list of users if you can provide that option. We do have the option of user list there. So you can actually provide that list, and the application will use those specific users and do a stress test on the specific reports. And while we do that, you can actually see what the amount of time it takes for this particular reports to load in. Let me switch back to the application and showcase this. So this is a stress test that I had run recently for a singular report. But critically, what you will see is that the application has the capability of going up, opening up filters, applying the reports filters to see exactly how long do these filters take to apply. And we see the response code. We see there's SLA timeouts in some places. And this is the type of thing that you as an end user need some control over. So that's what we provide in the first screen. And within the results screen, of course, you can export all of this information, see exactly which set of filter combinations were applied, for which specific filters we saw the response code 503, and a ton more information which is present within the product inherently. So that is basically stress testing. Now that concludes most of my demo points today, but as you can see, the application has a lot more hidden within the stock in terms of catalog testing, security testing, end-to-end validation, and a lot more in terms of integrations with other tool sets as well. But for now, I'd like to return this back to Anand, and again, me as well in this case, so that we can apply this knowledge and answer a few set of questions that we might have raised.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Shubhanshu. So let's do something a little different than on what we normally do. Puja, I see a lot of questions coming in. So do you want to ask a few questions, and then after that we can wrap up with the checklist and next steps?
Sure, Anand. So here is the first question: how to handle KPI tile values in Tableau dashboard using data gaps? Is there any parameter? I am new to data gaps, so
Well, there's a ton of parameterization that comes in within the product itself. In fact, these values of filters that we saw earlier, they're going to be parameterized for subcategories specifically. And within that itself, it's a pretty deep topic because as you can see, we have global parameters as well as local parameters that you can work with. So reusability is going to be the name of the game there. And you want to make sure once you define a singular test case, you can reuse it across different systems. Well, once again, defining different parameters itself. So we can have a subsequent discussion on this, but critically you can define your very own parameter list and use it within the list of filters or your key queries as per your requirement.
thanks. Next is there any testing environment or any community edition can be used free for someone testing?
So we do offer a 2-week POC that is free of cost. But again, for more information on that, you can get in touch with us. And I think that's more or less it.
Yeah. So just wanted to add here. So to add to Subhanshu's point, no, we don't have an open source version, but as he said, we offer a 2-week trial of our product. So you can choose a specific data set that, you can try with the product. And then after a discovery call, we can discuss next steps and, maybe extend the trial or think of other steps. So there are many options there, but we definitely would like to see you get started and test the product.
Yeah, thanks. And it will all be with full support, customer support that we'll be getting even with the trial phase. Now, next is, can we have Excel file with Tableau dashboard comparisons?
Absolutely. That is what we started with, which was a simple Tableau to Excel compare. And you can have multiple sheets as well. There's no blocker there.
And addition to it is output can it be taken out through Excel file?
Absolutely, yes. If you have any output, well, the application is going to store that as well, and you can download them as an Excel report right here, along with specifically what you would want to see. Again, this is one way to do it. You can also automate this entire process.
Okay. Next is how do you validate a modernization or migration end to end?
Yeah. So let's hold off on those questions and let's switch back to the slides and we'll answer some of the additional questions at the end. So let's do that.
Sure.
Okay. So let me start my screen share.
Already.
Okay, so let me. Okay. Are you able to see?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So before we, answer further questions, there were, some of those questions were very specific to the demo. And so I wanted those questions to be answered. Shubhanshu has the environment set up, so I wanted to show you that. So let's talk about next steps. How do you do this at scale? So you start by listing the reports and KPIs that matter most to your organization, those tied to the goals or targets or compliance that you have. You clean up the basics, the page layout, the labels, the filter names, so the choices are very clear. You check the data model, the links to the tables, the hierarchies, the logic of the measures. You make sure that you reuse the same definitions across the reports. Make sure that the data sets and extracts of those data sets are set up correctly and they refresh on time. So treat this as your input checklist. Next, check what users actually see. So for the key visuals, write the SQL that computes the same metric, compare it to the chart, test the filters with on-off, to find any kind of filter mistakes, verify the report data matches the source and that the extracts are fresh. You run the regression tests across dev, test, and prod. The differences should come only from the planned changes. You save the proof, the screenshot, the SQL results. So any kind of audit and fixes are fast. And you protect the access, right? The logic and the speed. So you test role and group permissions. So each audience sees only what they should. You confirm the KPIs follow the business rules. They stay consistent across the reports. You add simple cross KPI checks. You measure the page load. You click times under a realistic use. And if the test misses the target, tune the queries. Or the data sets or the measures, and then retest. Now you track the failed visuals, the slow queries with diagnostics, and you automate the checks on a schedule and at every release. So you share the templates and the test assets so that teams can reuse the work and scale the whole test environment. So the key takeaways from this whole webinar would be that automated BI testing products protects the trust and saves you time. You use 4 building blocks: the report to database checks to anchor the visuals to the SQL behind, the visual differences to catch the layout and the drift in the text. You filter matrices to verify the interactions, performance tests to protect the SLAs. You start small with one domain, wire the tests into your CI/CD process, publish those results, expect faster releases. So often 40 to 50% faster. It lowers your QA effort, 20 to 30% lower, and fewer support tickets. So as wins start to stack up, copy the approach to other teams, integrate with your catalog, your lineage tools to speed rule creation and focus the triage process. So the end state is simple: dashboards, people who trust those dashboards, and they are shipped on a predictable schedule. So the final call to action is bring a workbook. Someone brought up the trial. So bring a workbook to the trial and one KPI that matters. We'll set up a quick pilot for you, create the report to database checks, add a filter matrix and the visual differences, run a short performance test, connect it to your CI/CD and ticketing tools. So in 2 to 3 weeks, you'll have a clear before and after data, the time saved, the issues found early, the cycle time improvements to guide the next steps. So start with one team. Once the pattern works, clone it across different domains, across groups, using the templates and parameterized connections. So we can help you all this, while meeting your security and compliance and governance standards. So if you want to request a demo, that's our QR code right there. So thank you for joining. Automated testing makes dashboards reliable, faster to release, easier to support. So pilot one domain, prove the value fast, scale with governance. And if you want a hands-on session, bring a workbook and a KPI. Will help you set up your first plan, measure the results. That's our QR code there. Thank you for joining us this webinar. If there are any questions that we haven't answered, we will definitely get back to you via email, and we look forward to engaging more with you shortly. So Puja, over to you.
Thanks, Anand. One more question for Mr. Basant. Shubhanshu has already answered the question. The question was how much AI would help to minimize the effort compared to manual testing? Is there any cross-validation of AI output? So I hope you are satisfied with the answer that Shubhanshu has given. And next is, what about the data security? So do we cover that?
Yeah, sure. Data security is again a two-faceted answer with regards to BI. So firstly, when as Anand has mentioned, the application is installed and deployed within your infrastructure itself. So you don't really have to worry about compliance when the data and reports never really leave your system. And from our side at Datagaps, we don't even get back logs. So we are pretty secure and isolated on that front. But with regards to the other way this question could be interpreted, which is data security and security models in Tableau, yes, we have a few templates and test plans to validate the Tableau security model as well. So we can do it on that particular front.
Great. Next is how the left one. How do you validate the modernization or migration end to end?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a very detailed, response. As I said, we validate a number of different parts of the pipeline, from your ETL pipelines to your reports, as well as monitor your quality. Please engage with us, and we'll go into greater detail. This webinar was focused just on BI testing, but there are other parts of our portfolio that we are happy to engage with you. Please reach out to us, and we at contact@datagaps.com, and we can take that further.
Okay, last one is how do you prioritize which dashboard, APIs, and data domains to automate first?
Yeah, so choose your critical dashboards, right? Take 3 to 4 critical dashboards and choose the domain that will have a quick impact. And then start with that, pilot that project, see the results from that project. And then, slowly scale that to other teams and other projects. We are based on Spark architecture, so we can, compare billions of rows and scaling the number of users, scaling the number of simultaneous sessions. All that is possible with our platform. So do engage with us, and we'll get back.
Sure. Thanks. And in the end, with a full vote of thanks Anand for sharing valuable insights on how Datagaps Validator is enabling Tableau users worldwide to achieve trusted insights. And thanks to Shubhanshu for providing a clear demonstration that brought those capabilities to life. And if anybody has more questions to ask, please contact us at contact@datagaps.com. And we have also shared our links for a trial request for both Complete Suite and BI Validator both. Thanks a lot, everyone.
For further questions, feel free to reach contact@datagaps.com. Request a free demo. Scan the QR code below. Thank you.